Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating piece of analysis that offers one theory on how a dominant political party's own decisions might have, well, helped its biggest rival come to power. So, here's the big question this source tackles. How did the BJP rise to become such a major force in India? The theory presented here suggests that to find the answer, you actually have to look at the choices made over decades by its main rival, the Congress Party. And according to this source, our story kicks off right after India's independence. It all starts with what the text calls the very first domino to fall. So, what was that first domino? Well, it was this incredibly quick turnaround. In 1948, after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, the RSS, a Hindu nationalist group, was banned. But just a year later, that ban was lifted. The one condition was a written promise that they'd stay out of politics, which let them operate and grow under the label of a cultural organization. And here's the kicker, right? The source argues this was a huge miscalculation. The thinking at the time was, hey, if they're just a cultural group, their political threat is gone. But this analysis suggests that was a massive underestimation of how ideology can spread and build a base, even when it's not officially political. Now, let's fast forward to the 1970s to another key moment. During the emergency, the government cracked down on all sorts of opposition, and that included jailing RSS workers. But here's where things get really ironic, according to the source. By jailing them alongside pro-democracy activists, it accidentally gave the RSS a kind of martyr status and a legitimacy it just didn't have before. Okay, now we're jumping into the 80s, and this is where the source says those dominoes really start falling, and fast. This period was all about a series of high-stakes political moves that, according to the text, just completely backfired. So the government's in a really tough spot here. It was trying to perform this incredibly difficult balancing act, trying to keep conservative Muslim clerics happy on one side, while also dealing with the growing demands from Hindu revivalist groups on the other. And you can see that tightrope walk right here. On one hand, to please conservative Muslim leaders, the government passed a law that overturned a Supreme Court decision giving alimony to a Muslim woman, Shah Bano. Then, to try and balance the scales, it did something huge for the other side. It opened the locks of the disputed Babri Masjid, which was a major demand of Hindu nationalists. So did the balancing act work? Well, according to this source, absolutely not. It says the move alienated a lot of liberal voters, and at the same time, it handed the BJP its most powerful talking point. That first move with the Shah Bano case allowed the BJP to build this incredibly effective narrative that Congress was only interested in minority appeasement. And that narrative would stick around for a long, long time. So you can see how this is all building, right? The text argues that after making this huge concession on a key Hindutva demand, Congress then kind of lost control of the whole story. It didn't really offer a strong counter-narrative, and sometimes it even started using similar language. And the source gives us a few examples of how this played out. You started seeing things like campaign slogans talking about Ram Raja. The government allowed the broadcast of the Ramayan TV series, which was massively popular, and the source claims really boosted this revivalist feeling across the country. Plus, huge religious processions by these groups were often allowed, which just built more and more momentum on the ground. And all this momentum, it's all building towards one single pivotal year, 1992. In December 1992, the Babri Masjid was demolished. Now, at the time, the BJP was in power in that state. But the source's argument here is really important. This didn't just come out of nowhere. It was the explosive final act of years of mobilization and a narrative that, the source claims, the central government had failed to stop, and in some ways had even helped create. And this is where the text introduces a really interesting term for this whole strategy: soft Hindutva. The idea is that instead of pushing back with a strong, different message, the tactic became, let's borrow some of their themes so their voters don't leave us. But the supposed result? It just ended up making the BJP's core ideas seem more mainstream and legitimate. So what was the long-term result of all this? This chart kind of lays it all out, according to the source. By 2014, the RSS had a massive, solid grassroots network. The BJP's core story was stronger than ever. And meanwhile, Congress's ability to even offer a counterargument had been seriously weakened. So, if we pull all this together, what's the final takeaway here? The source basically argues that you can boil it down to 3 key ways that Congress, maybe without meaning to, helped its rival rise. Okay, so let's just boil it down. The source's whole argument rests on these 3 steps. First, it gave them legitimacy by saying, oh, it's just culture. Second, it gave them political openings with those big policy missteps. And finally, it allowed this powerful story to grow, a story of victims of so-called appeasement who were now rising up to be protectors. And that brings us to the end of our explainer, and it leaves us with a really powerful final thought. The source is asking us to think about the true cost of political decisions. What happens when the choices you make for short-term gain, to win one election or to quiet down one group, end up completely changing the rules of the game for generations to come? It's a heavy question, and definitely one worth thinking about.